know why I'm like super obsessed by making things move, making things breathe, making things interact. It's just something that I want to do. Some kind of like little creature that I have inside of me that wants to pursue doing that almost. I'm really interested in like how is our wardrobe gonna look like 20 years ahead in the future, or maybe 50 years, you know. I just like to throw up these little stories of possibilities almost in where we as humans wear certain technologies on our bodies that are different than the technologies that we are like living with today. For me, the emotional aspect, really seeing it as an emotional interface, really seeing it as an expressive interface is really important, because through that we can create new realities that are just so different than ours, because they are based on listening to the body and listening to our environment. I think my interest in fashion became around like I was 10 or 11. I always found it very fascinating that people could produce that notion of expression to the things that they wore. During my fashion school, I think I started to notice that the garments that I was creating, they were not sort of feeling with me, they were not noticing the world around them, they were very analog. And what I wanted was sort of bringing these fabrics alive, like making them move, making them smell, making them light up, making them sense the world almost, you know. So I took basically one of my other fascinations, which is robotics, and I started to see how I could combine that with my fabrics, because for me the robots were almost the heartbeat and the brains that I want my garments to have. So I started to basically combine those together. So I worked with computers, later on microcontrollers and computer boards. Technology has never been as small before, nor as intelligent before. That made it become like really easily to embed on the body, but also in garments and into textiles and all of that stuff. Spider dress is, I would say, one of my most intelligent systems, if you look from the system perspective. For me, the legs of a spider correlate to what we call degree of freedom in the field of robotics. So the more degree of freedom your robot has, the more you can do with it. When somebody comes in your personal space, it's literally attacking, sort of, and it's telling the world around you to basically back off, you know. What you have is, if people walk very fast, very close by, the system is reacting much more aggressively. So when you walk up slower at a slower pace, more elegant interaction with the dress, you can also see this in the dress. It almost has a mind of its own, and I'm really looking at sort of the symbiotic coexistence between the wearer and the dress. The cool thing about these sort of interactive things, they're never finished, because I'm always like reprogramming the dress. One of the things that I had in the former version of the spider dress, the system was always reacting. So what I actually did was I integrated a respiration sensor in there, and by the wearer breathing in, it could slow the system down. So almost that you say like, shh, not now, sort of, you know. A lot of my designs are a little bit around combining almost science or engineering in new ways, like figuring something out that might not be able to exist. I like to set sort of an almost a research question and then try to figure it out by really physically building something and then being able to demonstrate it and almost test it on different kinds of people. One of the things that I've been playing around with, it is my heartbeat dress. The model walking this catwalk might have an iron face, but has her heart shaking within her. That was quite interesting because on a catwalk you need to keep your face, you know, you almost have a poker face on, but then you do see that heartbeat going like, so many miles an hour, sort of, you know.
Anouk takes the idea of fashion and technology and creates stunning examples, right? That makes you think neither of fashion or neither of technology is just like a beautiful thing on its own. She transforms it into something that's much better than what most people do. So she's an exemplar of what is possible. And you don't need to know anything about how it's made to appreciate it.
A few of the things that we are still like wrapping our heads around are like washability, of course. Water is the #1 enemy of electronics. Batteries are an issue because batteries are never created for the body. And then also like maintaining, like if something breaks, how can that be fixed, you know? So that's why I'm interested in the do-it-yourself community and maybe open sourcing some of my designs instead of selling them. And then with that comes like, okay, if you break it, you can fix it yourself. You can maybe reprogram it, right? So what happens if you would open source like one of your projects? Where does it go, you know? Who takes it on or who reshapes it?
I just became enamored with this idea of solving my own problems. And once I realized that my own problems were also other people's problems, it was like, oh, this is great then. Like I'm killing 2 birds with 1 stone. And I just got completely hooked on it. A lot of my early work was focused on biomimicry. So looking, what is nature doing really well and how can we apply that to our new digital problems and our new evolutionary problems? If we want to create things that feel natural, why not create things that are natural? Why not look to our natural world and use that for inspiration to build the next generation of wearable devices? I love love moths. I think that they're the most beautiful things. They can be found all over the world. And so I'm always inspired by the moth. One thing that is amazing that moths do is camouflage. They are incredibly good at not being seen and being invisible. And so one of the ways that they do this is they have fake eyes on their back. And so this is to scare off any predators. And I thought, how can this honest moth create these, scare off such large animals? And what do we need to do that we need to scare off? What I realized was we're living in this digital world. More and more we are being under surveillance, where we are being tracked by our facial recognition softwares, we're constantly being surveilled. And now between all of our wearable technology, our cell phones, and also just surveillance cameras, you can be found so quickly on this entire planet. And so what I started to think was, how can we, like the moth, become invisible? And how can we trick ourselves from being tracked? And so from that came I Spy. And I Spy actually uses the principles of biomimicry as a form of counter-surveillance. And so it's a machine learning algorithm that's trained with thousands of images of moths in human eyes until it actually starts to output its own moths. And these moths actually have human eyes on their wings. And the cool thing about these moths, or these moth images, is that computer surveillance picks them up and thinks they're real humans instead of picking up my own eyes. And so then it was like, okay, this is a really cool discovery. I've been able to evolve these moths with human eyes. How can I bring this into practice? And so naturally, I started to create this wearable that was actually covered in screens, but the screens aren't for the wearer. They're actually for surveillance cameras and computer vision. And so the idea is, instead of picking up our own face, it actually picks up the constantly evolving, changing eyes on this necklace and allows you to walk and have this barrier between the digital and physical world. Because all I want and all I believe in is having the choice to choose when you're being seen or unseen. And so that's what I Spy does, is it creates this amazing barrier.
For the past 2 years as a student at Vanderbilt University, I've been working with children who have chronic illnesses at a children's hospital in Nashville, Tennessee. I've introduced the first mobile makerspaces at the children's hospital, addressing the needs of chronically ill patients. I call this new patient learning experience as Maker Therapy.
In 2015, I was invited to speak at the White House, and during the talk, I mentioned that patients are more than just sick kids in the hospital. They're bright, they're imaginative, they're inventive. And why should patients in the hospital be deprived from the global and growing maker movement? A hospital is an unconventional setting. And so it was redefining what does the maker movement and what does the makerspace look like in the context of a hospital. So part of my research was, can we design this kind of environment? Is it feasible? Is it practical to create this environment in a hospital?
During my freshman year of high school, I was diagnosed with chronic myeloid leukemia and received treatment all throughout high school. I underwent a bone marrow transplant and actually missed basically an entire year of school.
Hey man, go through struggle. Hard times come my way. I'm strong.
It's really difficult to be in the hospital for an extended period of time. It gets really repetitive of what you can do in the hospital. You feel so entrapped.
So one of the first projects that I worked at Stanford Children's Hospital was designing an innovation space within the cancer ward. I thought, like, it'll be really cool if I could collaborate, with patients in helping me with the design of the space.
Hi, I'm Ryan, and I'm coming to you from the 3D printing station at the Innovation Pop-Up Space. Today, I'm going to show you how to 3D print and how easy and fun it is to make an object using our 3D printer. Gokul explained to me the idea of maker therapy, allowing pediatric patients to kind of harness their creative mindset and really build anything they want. It really made sense to me right away because from my personal experiences being in the hospital,
I kind of made my doorbell just to help patients know when somebody's coming in. It's just kind of something that you help both the nurses and the patients.
As we were using the space with the patients, we were getting a lot of feedback from the nurses and the clinicians that the patients are more receptive to treatments, they're out of their bed, and their overall outlook was much more positive.
With the space you have created, it actually gets me more active.
What do you mean?
Because it motivates me to get out of bed and do stuff.
I wanted to measure how physically active they were, and so we used wearables on the patients to measure their physical activity. And the results were truly fascinating. With the space in their room, the total number of steps started to gradually increase to more than 7.5-fold. From 320 steps to more than 2,500 steps. I thought maybe these are more than just learning environments. They could also be therapeutic environments where it improves their mental health, but it also improves their physical health.
It's amazing how one little thought turned into something this big.
The whole idea, of maker therapy was, inspired by Brandon. I think I was nervous also because, Brandon was the first patient that I worked with.
Well, you made such an impact on him. I remember whenever he was in the hospital, he had nothing to look forward to. All his mind concentrated on was being sick and the treatments and what all he was missing out. And whenever you got into the picture, it gave him something to look forward to.
He wanted something that stimulated his mind. And he asked me, he said, can you give me something where I can be truly engaged in an activity? And so I remember taking this shoebox and I put in some art and craft materials, I put in a microcontroller, I put in some circuits, and I covered it up. And I said, hey, Brandon, here's your mystery box. And I want you to design and make anything you can imagine using the stuff in the box. And I remember the next day at 6 in the morning, I got an email from Brandon's mom saying, hey, Gokul, you need to come back to the hospital. Brandon actually made something. And I remember asking Brandon, hey, why didn't your mom go to the local store and just get a motion control light? And he said something truly powerful to me. He said, I spent close to 8 hours working on this that I forgot I was in the hospital.
You made a huge impact on Brandon's life. And I am so thankful that you didn't give up because I know how many times you were told this won't ever work. And look at how many lives you have impacted.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's true.
I still see those pictures. Right?
Yeah. He's smiling down on you right now. And he's fist bumping you of what the impact you're making on everybody else.
experience with Brandon inspired me to engage with other kids in the hospital using these mystery box activities. The results were like truly fascinating. You can put in all the smartest engineers and makers in a room and say, let's create something for kids, and none of us would create those, come up with those ideas.
One of the things that I was working on was taking sort of the medical devices out of the medical setting and creating a headset that was really fun instead of scary and medical and very technical. If you have children with ADHD, they often get medication at a young age, and though medication is there, of course, to help, sometimes that can really create a problem in the sort of behavior of children. For me, creating Aging Unicorn was all about creating a situation in where you're not putting medicine in the body of a child. I created basically a headset that was able to read and detect the brain signals of the child. So the unicorn, the Aging Unicorn has like basically a unicorn horn with a little camera in there. And the camera goes on when the attention hits a certain threshold, and then it starts recording. And then it's a fun discussion to go into them, because they can see that how often things are triggering them, sort of, and some of these kids were not super aware of that. So we have Bella here controlling a robotic arm with a unicorn behind. And you can see here over Simulink. And here you can see you're controlling it. Circus, circus. 20,000 Pomeranians, 20,000 Pomeranians.
There we go. There we go, fully opened. Awesome. So what you have going on here is that you have your brain waves that are creating these signals, and we're taking the energy state within that, we call it power density, and we're converting that for like when you have a high amount of energy that's coming through that location, we're causing one movement of the fingers, and when you have the opposite of that or a relaxation of that state, we're doing the opposite movements. So as you go, so go ahead and try and do like a relaxation state and try to relax your brain and get your body to not be putting out a lot of energy. As the signal goes down, open the fingers up. And so we're seeing a little bit of a back and forth, and so this is a very untrained system. There's nothing wrong that you're doing here. What the goal is not just to control one movement, but to be able to make these prostheses more intuitive, to where you're not trying to think of controlling closing and opening. You're really thinking of, let me reach out and grab that. So these are the early stages of, this is prototyping. This is like the first stages of taking the brain, converting it into some movements, making fingers move. But think of where the possibilities of something like this goes. I can put this on a stick, I can put this on a person, I can put this on the table here for a demonstration. I have a little teensy right here plugged into this. A $30 teensy is plugged into a $25,000 hand, and we're able to then control it from the brain of a patient, which in the past would be something that you'd spend a couple $100,000 on a project, multiple years of investment of your time, and so I definitely see all of these things opening a lot of doors.
I think definitely, the sort of the superpowers that we currently maybe not have with our normal hands, how can you expand on that? How can you really create
almost technological marvels, but also where's the art in that, right? So yeah, it's probably yeah, mechanized and practical, but also artistic in some way.
The brain is very complicated, and we as humans almost know like a fraction of what is going on there. In 2012 was the first time that I worked with a brain-computer interface, and I was really, yeah, just fascinated by the amount of data that you can sort of acquire with it. I think that really triggered my sort of my fascination for that field. The things that I'm trying to do is basically working with sort of raw brain signals in order to express certain states that you have and express that in and through the garments. So I've been using a few different brain-computer interfaces over the years. One with like 64 electrodes to down to only 2, down to 8, and also the latest products actually has to do with 1024 channels. I created a dress that could correlate each of those channels and each of those signals to anything happening in the dress. For me, what was kind of really cool is we built in basically a sort of a neutral state in where the dress was blue. The dress was in a meditative state. It was like purple, it was like flowy, and the scales were going up and down. And when yeah, the data was more hectic, sort of, it was like, yeah, flickering, and the scales went just wild. And through that, we could exactly basically see how she was, yeah, how our wearer was doing. So that was basically yeah, created as an sort of an input-output situation, in where, yeah, the brain was the input and the dress basically created the outputs and also the expression. I think that's in the end really important that we have a partnership with the technologies that we're using, and that partnership is really important for the future on how we are gonna live together with all the electronics and all the robotics and all the wearables and yeah, electronic garments around us.
We are going to Hadley's house. So Hadley was a patient that I worked with at Stanford Children's Hospital. She was a frequent visitor to the 3D printing zone that I had designed at the teen room at the hospital. And I haven't seen Hadley or her family since the end of 2019. So this is really exciting. They haven't seen me, and I'm surprising them with a 3D printer.
I'm very excited. I think Granddad's been doing better. So yeah, definitely. I'm really excited for that.
Yeah.
What are you doing here?
What are you doing here?
Hi,
what are you doing here?
Hi.
For years. Oh my gosh.
It's been since 2020?
2020?
Like 2020?
Maybe 2020, early 2020.
Early 2020. Gosh.
Yeah, because we went and had dinner.
Your hair's so long now.
Thank you.
As soon as I met Gokul, it was like the world slowed down almost. Like, it's not, okay, you're sick, you need to take these medicines at this time, you need to stop doing crafts and come back and get your vitals checked. Like, none of that. It was just, how can I make your time here better?
I have a hospital tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
So I need something.
What's
Why
practical?
don't we do something, something that'll like really help you out? Ooh, what about a tubing holder?
Yeah, because I
Like my gecko?
Yeah, like when I go on walks, it's really hard.
Gecko holder.
Maybe that one? No, I think that would be.
She would brainstorm ideas with me. She would tell me that there's certain issues that I face when I'm hospitalized, and I would like to use the 3D printer to help improve my stay while in the hospital.
Shall we print it out?
Yeah, let's see.
Let's do it. Okay. Save to.
I had a problem with having IV fluids because the fluids were so cold and irritating to the vein. So what I figured out was that I could create something to hold warmers on the IV bag to warm up the fluid, because although some are available, that's more for emergency situations, and they just don't have the resources to have a luxury like that at a lot of hospitals. So basically, the first thing I did had one side looked like this, literally broken, didn't work so well. So then I tried, and on this iteration also it added these triangles to hook the levels together that basically holds the bag and a warming pack, lets the patient walk around. And then I decided that I could do maybe better. So I worked with a consumer design company, and it's still in progress right now, but basically is you take the bag, you take a warmer, you put it inside of the silicone so it's insulated, and then it closes up like this, hangs very nicely, gets warm. So that's another approach. I kind of like this more aesthetically.
And so she was progressing from just some person who was tinkering and like fiddling around with the 3D printer to becoming an expert. And then she became a true inventor and engineer. That didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen over a few weeks. It happened over months as well.
Just to think that I went from something as simple as printing out a phone stand that someone else designed to creating a warmer and a holder for IV bags is just crazy to me. And it's just those things that seem so simple and trivial to people on the outside that mean the world to kids who are sick.
One day I woke up and I was like, okay, so I've been copying nature for a long time. You know, I've been seeing nature and mimicking nature, but why am I mimicking nature? Why don't I just let nature solve the problem herself? Why not look to our natural world and use that for inspiration to build the next generation of wearable devices? And you know, why not go a step beyond that? And instead of saying, okay, let's create wearable devices that feel natural, why don't we grow wearable devices? And so that's kind of my thesis for my work, is how can we grow technology around us? Why not take nature with us as a designer and as an active participant in the design and maker process? And so that's kind of where this idea for this new collection came, was how do we move beyond biomimicry and start designing directly with nature through interspecies collaborations to ensure nature has a space in our futures. And so the first approach was through these computational simulations. For example, I was able to see how barnacles would grow off of a body, which they could never grow in real life. They can only grow underwater and off of rocks. And the other half of the collection is really getting down and dirty and working with a lot of these natural collaborators and organisms. And so, for example, I've been working with slime mold, I've been growing mushrooms, I've been dyeing textiles with bacteria, I've been growing conductive crystals to create new interfaces. I think one aspect of the collection that I'm really focused on is how can we say, okay, we don't want to have circuit boards anymore. We want to have conductive interfaces. We want to have conductive crystals that are grown. How can we not only take the forms and design the forms with nature, but how can we design a manufacturing process to create these new sustainable wearable devices and sustainable designs that are all grown? And so as a maker and as this kind of generalist and just as a learner, what we can do is connect the dots. You know, it's no longer just a maker project. It's talking to biologists, it's talking to scientists, it's talking to designers, talking to the next generation of students and how to inspire this thinking. And so it's really about how can we kind of in this generalist way connect these dots to create these brand new ideas. And that's what happened with the Beyond Biomimicry collection, which is so exciting to see.
Charlie was very fragile when we brought him home from the hospital. His first 3 years were really hard, and no one expected him to even live to his first birthday. And he's just surprised us. I mean, he's 22 years old now. He's had 18 different surgeries and procedures. He's funny, he's bright, he is a wonderful person. We're so grateful to have him in our lives. But it's been hard. You know, there's been many days that I have felt like I'm walking with one foot on a path of joy and happiness because we celebrate all his developmental successes and things that he accomplishes that we never thought he would. And my other foot is in a path of really deep sorrow and loss and grief over the many things that he cannot do, and the fact that he could die at any moment because his lung disease is so bad. Charlie always tells people that George Mark Children's House is his home away from home, and that's exactly the way he feels about it. This is his second home.
I've known Charlie since I started working at George Mark 3 years ago, and he just graduated with his high school diploma. Charlie's unique because he does everything with his feet. Because I had worked for 2 years in the pediatric intensive care unit and seeing children die in the hospital setting, I knew that we could do death better for children. So that led me to George Mark, in a place where children who are chronically ill or have a life-limiting illness have the support of a palliative care team. And we're the very first freestanding pediatric palliative care facility in the United States.
When I first came here, I remember I had like goosebumps. And I remember when I left the facility, I was like crying in my car. I was like, this is such a difficult setting. I've worked with chronically ill patients, but I've never worked with patients who, who have a terminal illness. So this was a moment for me to think about maker therapy, to think about how do you design an environment where 99% of the patients are nonverbal? How do you create an environment where it also engages families as well? So there's all these unknowns because you're creating a space which is creating a legacy.
When I heard about Gokul's Maker Therapy program, it was actually through social media, and I saw the work that he was doing at Stanford. And I thought it would be a really interesting thing to bring Maker Therapy into the pediatric palliative care setting, because I was very curious how we could use technology to memorialize the lives of our patients and families, and then also to allow our patients to be creative and invent.
You need to have people within the setting who embrace this maker approach. And she was a person who truly embraced the power of the maker approach and the willingness to learn. When I first met with Kyle, she'd never used a 3D printer. She's never used any of the technologies. And she became so intrigued by it that she became so proficient. And she's become this collaborator where we're trying out different ideas, we're exploring new kinds of technologies. And she's the definition of a true maker within the medical world.
The last place you'd expect to find a makerspace. You know, Gokul Krishnan, he's kind of determined to make these things work. Does it matter that these kids learn how to use 3D printing or anything like that? Not really. In the family context, which I think this is, a great example of, creating something in someone's final days, that will be a memory for that family is really positive.
One of my objectives since the start of Maker Therapy was getting the younger generation to be more engaged with patients in the hospital.
So all of these tiles are in honor of a child that has died here at George Mark Children's House. Every tile is created by the child's family after they've died. And I just love how you can see the kids' personalities in each tile. Like here you have Noah's tile, and you see him there. The Pilot City students, they are high school and college students who are familiar with 3D printing and laser cutting and are really experts on that.
There's a lot of people who are using the space, like child life specialists, like nurses and volunteers who, they're using technologies like the 3D printer, like the laser cutter that's new to them. And so you can't expect them to, learn a new software or, troubleshoot technologies. Oh!
It worked? Yay!
You saved the day.
So we just did full power, lower speed.
And 170, right, was the magical number.
So what I presented to them were some ideas of legacy items that I would love to learn how to make and that patients and families could customize. So the students are coming up with their own prototypes of those things, and then they will make instructional guides so that I can read the guides or watch the videos they create and easily be able to recreate their prototypes with patients and families. One of the siblings I was working with earlier today wanted these for his mom and their little hummingbird earring.
For us, the legacy building has always been important. Especially for children, I feel like it gives this tangible connection to have something that you make. His name was Noah Atticus, about 3 months old. It was a rough night. He just kind of got really sick just from one day to the next. And very quickly we learned that he had massive brain damage, irreparable. So it was very traumatic, very fast.
Charlie's very clear that if he should be dying, he wants us to bring him here, and he wants to die here, rather than dying at home or in a hospital.
Rest now, let go. Time
It's been important for me to have my daughters continue to come back here, especially my oldest. It's good for them to see, to remember, to kind of keep that connection.
My hope for Maker Therapy is that I can help train other child life specialists at pediatric palliative care facilities and children's hospitals around the country and even the world on how to create a makerspace in a healthcare setting and how to engage patients and families in using that space and to create different things.
Not every country has a dedicated children's hospital. Not every country has a pediatric palliative care facility, but every country has young children, unfortunately, who have a chronic illness, who has a terminal illness. So my goal is, how do you truly make this global and impact chronically and terminally ill youth in countries all over the world, and to create a more hopeful world for all children who have a chronic or terminal illness.